Thank you to everyone that's joined us. Hello, my name's Helen Carroll. I'm VP of Marketing at Opsview. Today's webinar session is tips and tricks on Opsview Monitor and the new BSM. Some of the screenshots may look slightly different to the systems that you're running. That's because our wonderful Neill Collie that joins us today is using the latest version of Opsview Monitor and some, I think, forward screenshots of the new BSM coming out after the summer as well. So the session is being recorded today. We will be sending the recording out tomorrow for you. So if I can ask everyone to stay on mute for the session, that way we maintain the audio quality. Any questions, please ask those in the chat facility and we'll find 5-10 minutes at the end for Neill to answer those. So thank you for joining, and over to you, Neill.
Thank you, Helen. And yes, thanks everyone for joining. Today is Opsview tips and tricks. So we're going to go through, say, 20, 25, 30 minutes of some tips and tricks. And then at the end, I will show, I'll actually demo some of the new BSM functionality and show everyone how to hopefully get the most out of that. We have an Opsview Essentials course, and this course usually lasts about 3 hours, but I'll try and condense it so everyone is on the same page for our tips and tricks. Just a recap from our Essentials course is a host in the Opsview sense is a container for services. It's anything addressable, so anything with an IP address or a DNS address that can then contain or hold our service checks. And a service check or a service is something that we are interested in, something we care about. So think CPU usage or network throughput or memory usage, or whether or not a specific service is up and running. And its plugins do all of the heavy lifting, all of the hard work. So they're the scripts or executables that actually do the monitoring logic. So where we see check MySQL or check Apache or check AWS or check CPU or check memory, whatever we're checking, that's a plugin, and that plugin does all the actual hard work. We organize our hosts and services into groups. And both host checks and service checks use plugins. And then we can use dashboards and other tools to pull this information out of Opsview and view it in a potentially useful way. So if I click my navigator page, we can see we've got our hosts here on the left, our host status here in the middle. Luckily, everything is up. And then we've got our service check status here on the right, where I can see what's up and what's down. I've got a combination of warnings, criticals, and unknowns, and then the vast majority of my service checks here are OK and green. A warning is we've breached a threshold and something may need to look into something. Critical is we've very much got a problem, we need to look into it. And the unknown is that the plugin simply hasn't been able to run and we don't have the information, so we don't actually know. And OK is, of course, OK, everything's green, we're happy with the way things are. We can create dashboards to show this. So in our monitoring tab, we've got a link to view all of the information that Opsview is already monitoring. So I can go to view some dashboards, I can go to my overall navigator page, which is where I am here. I can view my hashtags, my BSM, and then I can do things like view an overall list of problems, look at the graph center, look at any notifications that have been sent out recently, and then look at a recent event viewer. So this tab is anything that's already in Opsview, so things are already configured. In configuration, this is the entry point for adding new hosts, adding new service checks, and modifying any existing settings. So when we come to configuration, we're often going to hit configuration for hosts as we add new hosts, and service checks as we add new service checks. As you use your new Opsview 6 systems, when you do get to Opsview 6, you'll see we build up this most used menu as well, and this is another handy little tip, handy little trick. This most used menu is the last 12, it's the most used 12 items, so you can see I'm often hitting navigator, I'm often applying changes, and I'm often modifying hosts. So as you run through daily use of your Opsview environment, this menu will become populated, and you'll be able to get to your most frequently used things much faster. My links are things you can build up as you as you use the system too. So if I want to add a particular view or add a particular graph or add a particular page to this My Links page, I can do so. I just, for example, on this page, if I want to view all of my web servers and associated service checks with all 4 of them, I can create that view quite happily, and then I can click this share icon in the top right, and this allows me to share this view. I can either copy this and give that to colleagues, and this will take them straight to the view I've just created, or I can add it to my links and say I'll call this one Apache servers. If I add that to my links, I can now go straight to this view of Apache servers from anywhere wherever I am in the application. So say I might be making changes to a service check, and I want to, for whatever reason, quickly come back to that Apache servers view. This My Links page is an excellent way to do that. I can now open My Links and then open this new Apache service link up in a new tab. And all it's doing is using this unique ID to link me straight to the view. So you can send this to colleagues and anyone who's got access to this Opsview training environment. You could send them this view and they see the exact same thing you're seeing here. And that can be quite useful, especially if you've dug into a few sub host groups, and you've clicked through and you found the exact service check you want, and you want to share this view directly with someone, or you want to save this view for quick, easy access later. This is a really handy little option to do so. So often you'll find that on a busy Opsview installation, sometimes the web UI is a little bit slow, and you won't know why, because you've got a very powerful web server, you've got plenty of resource devoted to your Opsview installation, and you wonder why it takes a little time for your web interface to load. If you've got a relatively well-spec machine, and if you've got plenty of memory available, what you can do is increase the number of Starman server processes, and it's Starman that serves our dynamic pages that does a lot of the hard work. So it's possible to increase the number of these processes to say 20, for example, instead of 10, and this can greatly speed up how quickly Opsview serves pages and how fast the web interface responds to you. It's assuming you have memory. So if you've got a few gigabytes of RAM free, and this setting was 10, which is its default, if you've got 2 or 3 gigs of RAM free, you can increase that max servers up to 20 or up to 15, and then you've got a few more processes to serve your web interface, and that can hugely speed up things, especially if a large number of people are accessing the interface at the same time. Each worker will serve visits, and the more of those you have, the quicker those requests will be handled, and the faster your users will be able to use Opsview. This is of course assuming you've got free memory. All of that lives in this file here, so it's opsview webapp opsview local web.yaml. So if we quickly take a look at that file, we'll see that mine is currently set to mine is now set to 20. So I need to get my spacing just right because this is XML. So I've just nudged 2 along. I've got production engine match servers 20, so I can at most have 20 of these worker threads going, minimum 5. I would have to restart my Opsview web service to get that working. And we can see how many of those are going to be running if I do a quick check. So I've got a few worker threads running and 1 Starman main thread. So if you want to check how many of these you've got, I've got 3 currently going, 1 master. You can improve your web performance by increasing these numbers. We can also modify what Opsview does in the event of a failed login. So as of 6.35 and in all future versions, we've introduced a couple of security features to make Opsview a bit more robust. And one of those is login throttling. So we block login attempts if there's been too many failures. If you want to modify these settings, again, that's in user vars, but if you want to modify at what point those throttlings kick in, so for example, we'll have, if the same IP addresses fail, if the same IP fails 50 times within an hour, then we'll block it. If the same user fails 10 times within an hour, then it's blocked for an hour. You can change these thresholds here using what we call a web override. So this adds settings to our web config file, so we can add this to one of our user config files, and this changes that setting. So if you can either make it slightly more restricted or slightly less restricted depending on your organization's requirements. So you can just go modify this file. And we're looking at modifying these settings at the bottom here. So I'll be changing IP limit or user limit or the window. This is of course seconds, so 3600 seconds is your hour. So if I want to make changes to that, I can do that. I can do that here. You can also check in the database if a user has been blocked. You can check a specific table called web lockouts to make sure to see who's in that table if you wanted to. Okay, heading back to the UI. This is another feature that we've hugely improved for Opsview 6. So this is a big improvement to making bulk changes to your hosts and to settings in just a few clicks. So whereas you may have to, previously either you had to write an API query or manually do a lot of clicking, what we can do now is say I want to change all of these MySQL servers. I want to change a setting for all 5 of these in one go. So either I want to add a host template, so I can click add to existing and then add another host template to these systems. So I want to include some base Unix monitoring as well. I can do that, or I can change which server monitors them. I can change their host group, of course, and a few other settings. So I can change descriptions, change the icons we see, and some advanced settings like parenting. So if I want to give all of these a parent in one go, I can do that. So this Cisco system and this second Cisco system here are now parents of these 5 MySQL servers. I can change the check period, and I can change things like the host check command if I want to. So this has been hugely improved since in previous versions of Opsview. We can make lots of changes to lots of systems in just a few clicks instead of having to manually go and click every single system one at a time. One other thing that has changed is, especially if you're using Opsview 5 or Opsview 4, when we have to apply reloads, this is now much faster, and we've got a much better indication of reload progress and where we actually are in that reload. So instead of an estimate, this is a real-time indicator of how we're doing, of how far through the reload we've got. And as soon as this completes, as soon as this bar reaches the end, it will actually be complete. So that too is an improvement over previous versions of Opsview. We can also just apply changes in the background, let that run happily, and go back about our business. Bulk edit feature is much more usable than it used to be. So once we've got and made some changes to our hosts, we maybe want to add some parameters to them, but maybe we want to add parameters that service checks can use. So variables let us do this. Variables let us add per host settings to be used by subsequent service checks or host checks. So something that a plugin could then read. So for example, credentials, thresholds, and settings. And here I've got one of those database servers. We've added just MySQL credentials so that one of our service checks can log in and run some MySQL admin commands, so we can see the health of these database servers, and we see that here. So you can see the writes received. If I go and troubleshoot this, what we'll see is it's using these two variables here, MySQL username and MySQL password, and they're stored, but they are sensitive, so we don't get to see them in the user interface. Opsview is contextually aware enough to know that we shouldn't be displaying MySQL credentials here. And you can, if any of your variables are encrypted, they won't be displayed. So we could take a look at that. Edit our config for host. We will see these variables have the username as root, and then we've got an encrypted value for our password. If I was to reset that password or modify it, I wouldn't be able to see it once it had been saved, and we wouldn't be able to see it on our service check menu. What I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly add a variable called disk to one of these MySQL servers, just so we can see how that works. So if you're wanting to check, so I've got a service check now that is running against this server, and it's going to be looking for disk space on these partitions, on etc and on varlib MySQL. And this disk check is looking for a variable called disk, and it will create as many service checks as it needs to check as many partitions as we need. So as soon as I have finished applying changes here, so as soon as this change takes effect, what you'll see is that on one of our servers, on MySQL server 1, we are now going to also be checking disk space as well as all of these MySQL metrics and the Unix load average and memory that we just added. So pretty soon we'll have another couple of checks on this one server here. Variables are very useful, and they help you just an easy way of including credentials or host specific thresholds or host specific settings, things like that. It's very easy to add a variable too. We just go to configuration and then variables, and you'll see here that a lot of these are populated out of the box. So there's 160 or so, and I've got page showing 50, but I'll show the whole lot. A lot of these are populated out of the box by our inbuilt service checks, but if I wanted to add a new one, I just click add new, call it NC variable, for example. And if any of these arguments or any of these specific settings need to be encrypted, I hit encrypt. So this is going to be encrypted argument 1, that would be encrypted. This one would be encrypted argument 2, that would be encrypted, and we would be able to see those if we use these variables in our service checks. Okay, so there's a few similar to variables. We can modify some default settings that are actually pretty useful. So similar to using variables, we can set certain defaults here, and I've set for my host interfaces, I've set default throughput. So in this file here again, in our user vars file, what I've done is I've just set default throughput default discards default errors, and these are SNMP specific settings, but we could have done it for normal hosts or normal service checks too. We've set these, and then now I don't need to go through the hassle of every time I create a service check, I don't need to set this default throughput critical value to anything. Well, if I want it to be 55, I can be rest assured that it's going to be 55. We can add quite a few categories here, so I can do service checks and hosts, and I can do default timeout, default service check period, default interval, and default notification interval too. So there's a few useful settings I can add to this page, and we'll find those on our knowledge base on one of our tips and tricks pages. Just wanted to make you aware of the fact that we can add certain things to user vars to change the default behavior. And this brings me on to some troubleshooting tips and tricks. So if we are wanting to find out more about what our Opsview system is doing, we can utilize logging, of course. So Opsview will use syslog to log the output from all of its components. So we can have all of our Opsview collectors, all of our Opsview infrastructure sending logs back to the same place, or they can all log individually. It's very, very configurable. So we can have per component level logging as well. So I can set debug logging on a per component level. So if I just want to see what my executor is doing, I can do that. I can just up the level in one of my files, one of these executor files. So I can go say edit this file, change it from notice up to debug, and then restart the process. If I then tail my Opsview log file, what I'll see is a lot more info coming out through my log file. So what I see here is the actual full output of every single service check. So if I'm trying to work out why a service check isn't running, or I'm trying to work out why I'm getting an odd result, I can set debug mode on my executor process and just use the information I get to find out potential issues. So I can see maybe there's a problem with some of the arguments I'm using, maybe there's a problem with some of the password, or maybe I've misspelled some credentials or something like that. Upgrading, upping or increasing that log level can be very, very useful. We can do it for most, if not all, of our components. So for things like we've got orchestrator components, which runs some of the scheduling. We've actually got scheduling, a whole scheduler component, which decides when service checks are run and on which server. So if I'm not sure what is happening there, that's another thing I can change. So I can get a lot more information from my scheduler to find out where various service checks and various hosts have been assigned. And then I can do that on my collector too. So if I want to SSH to my collector, I can increase log verbosity on that collector's executor itself, and see if I could type, that'd be useful. So I can change the logging level on the collector. So a collector is a separate system that is set to run service checks and send it back to the main orchestrator. But if that's set, I can now view that kind of increased service check info on my collector too, so I can see which systems this particular machine is setting. And another helpful command is in the orchestrator cluster host. So this is a very useful little command that lets you see how your hosts are spread across your environment. So you can see I've got one collector and my main Opsview monitoring server here. And running this command, I can see when each was last updated and on which host, in which cluster each host has been assigned. So I can see that most of my hosts are on this cluster, and I've only got one object on this cluster. So if you're ever curious as to how your hosts are distributed amongst your clusters and you need that in a easily output format, then this is an excellent command to do that. Oh, this one is also handy. If you ever lose the admin password, or someone leaves and doesn't tell you what the admin password is, or for whatever reason you don't know your administrator password in the database, you can run this command with this text. I know that this is hash text to reset my admin password back to initial. So I can log into my database server. And then I can just set my encrypted password to that string, and I know that that is a string initial but encrypted, and then I can then I'll be able to relog in using that admin ID. So if ever you lose that password, this is a very handy way of resetting it, assuming you've got MySQL root access. So you need to be able to get access to your Opsview database. So this is my database server. I have a few Opsview databases on here: Opsview, ADW, Runtime, and one of the tables in Opsview is contacts, and these are the encrypted password string. So all I'm doing is updating that string for the admin user. Okay, so another thing that you may find yourself doing, especially if you're in a very busy environment, if you're monitoring a lot of infrastructure, you've got a lot of collectors or a lot of systems doing a lot of monitoring. You want to keep an eye on your infrastructure, make sure everything is functioning healthily, make sure you've got enough resource to be able to manage that, manage and monitor your entire environment. And Opsview does a lot of self-monitoring, so we can keep an eye on things like our message queue rate per collector, so I can make sure that my collector has enough grunt to handle the workload. So back last week, maybe I needed to add slightly more, or maybe I was doing too much work. But now, this week, everything seems to be in order. I've got 0 messages waiting in my queue, and every time that this service check has run, so every 5 minutes it runs, but every time we've checked, I've had nothing in the queue, which means that, by and large, the queue is being processed in good time, so we're not having messages sit there for a long period unchecked or unacknowledged or unused. And this is ideally what you want. So if you find that you've often got messages in your message queue, if you find that there's an issue here, often you want to do some troubleshooting and find out what those messages are. So what I often do is just on on the system itself, you can list your queues. So you can list your message queues and see what's going on. So this command, you can use RabbitMQ admin with your password, or you can use another command called RabbitMQ CTL, and that's just list queues, and that shows you the same data, assuming you spell the command correctly. So that shows you the exact same data, but it's all down to personal preference. I prefer the output of this with a slightly more readable table. We can see I've got a big results exporter queue here, and this is something I was configuring yesterday, and I was sending that to my own endpoint, and that endpoint has been turned off as of this morning. So I've got a bunch of messages in that queue, and they're getting larger and larger and not going anywhere. So as soon as I resolve this, I will see that this queue goes down. So this is quite a handy way of checking the status of your Opsview message queues, of your Opsview infrastructure. As long as everything is around this level, this queue excluded, of course, but as long as everything is hovering around your 1s and your 2s and your 10s, and you're fine up to 100 or so. But if they get much higher than that, then you're either looking at increasing resource or adding a collector or moving some hosts around, that kind of thing, to make sure your Opsview monitor system can handle all of that load. And this really is a good way of checking you've got enough resource to handle that. You can also grab a UI for RabbitMQ. I'm not actually going to do that right now because it won't play nicely with screen sharing software. And but if you do want to be able to see your RabbitMQ and you don't have direct access to port 15672, you can tunnel it from your domain or your main orchestrator through to your own UI. That's fine, but you can just open up port 15672 and then you can log in with the password in deploy etc user secrets, and this has some credentials for some of the microservices that we use. So if ever you need to manually check your message queue or check your data store, log into your database, and you need that root connectivity info, you can read this file. This file is only readable by the root user on the system, so only someone who's logged into the system as the root user can view this. Nobody else can see it. And it's generated on the initial installation of Opsview. Hopefully there's going to be some questions for Helen at this point, but I do want to hop into BSM. So if you do have some questions, please use the WebEx chat. We'll address them in just a moment. But for now, I'm going to run through 5 minutes on our new BSM. So for those of you not aware, BSM was our way of making sense of your Opsview environment. So here we've got some things that we're interested in. So maybe I'm interested in a company website or a marketing system, or some tools that our engineers use, or some tools that our sales team use. And these overall BSMs, business system monitoring, these overall BSM modules, they are made up of components. So I'll show you our classic BSM view for now. They're made up of components. So say I've got a company website, and I know that this company website requires virtualization, two pieces of network equipment, a cluster of 4 Apache servers, 4 redundant storage servers, and then I've got 5 MySQL servers powering the databases for this website. What we did with BSM is try and make it clear about how the health of our environment and build in a little bit more intelligence and a little bit of fault tolerance into our system. So what you can see, if you look closely, is grey boxes around some of these systems, and these grey boxes indicate fault tolerance. So you can see here, I've got it around 3 of the 5 MySQL servers, 1 of the SAN servers, 3 of the web servers, and here we've got it around 1 network device. So that just indicates that I need 3 database servers online, 3 Apache servers online, etc. So if 1 of these goes down or 2 of these go down, I can consider the whole website still functional. I can consider the whole website still functional if only 1 Apache server goes down. But if 2 go down, then I'd consider the system or the website to have failed. So this is designed to add a little intelligence and bring a little sense to our environment. Because if we go back to our main navigator page, what we'll see is service check data for service check and host check data for everything here. If 1 of these servers goes down, so if I simulate the system going down, we can see it very clearly that it's down. We can see that there's an issue. So we've got 1 down here. It's big and it's red. My service checks have gone critical straight away. But really, the view isn't changed hugely. It's I know that I've got an Apache server down, but I don't know what impact that has. I don't know whether that affects customers or people internally or both, and I don't really know how badly it is just now. So what I do know is that it's affected 1 Apache server. But if I go to BSM, if I go to my BSM config, in both views, so in our classic view, I can see that it's been affected, and I've got one component impacted, and I know that something's not quite right. We've recently worked on a much more improved, much more readable view for our BSM layout, so I can see that I've got 1 Apache server affected in this Apache stack, and I can see that on my website is affected. I can see which component is affected and how and which service check is affected straight away just by clicking 1 thing here. So I know that from this view, something here isn't quite right. If another system goes down, so if, I'm sure you're well ahead of me, but if I break another web server and the second one goes down, because I've got this this threshold, this fault tolerance built in, this we need 3 of 4 servers online settings out here, I know that if a second one goes down, my website is in trouble. So right on cue, a second one looks like it's just gone down, and we see that the website's indications has gone offline. I can see that my availability has begun to drop, so 99.98%, 99.97 starts to go down very quickly when the whole thing is offline. So if I expand the whole tree, I can see exactly what caused that, and it looks like it's just that the Apache web server is offline, so I can go investigate straight away. So we see one of the main benefits here of BSM is that I can see exactly which systems are affected, so I can see who's affected and how badly. And then if I click and investigate, in one view, I can see just what has affected, just for which system's going down and how badly the effect those systems going down has. So I can see that 2 of these web servers going down is not good at all, and that I need to investigate straight away. I really want to get these fixed, so I dispatch my best Opsview consultant to fix this web server. And if I can get 1 back online relatively quickly, then hopefully we'll see that these start to go these start to go green. So if I go back to my BSM overview, we'll see in no time at all, drum roll please, things start to go green, and our websites and our engineering systems and everything comes back online. And our Apache stack too will come back online. So it takes a little while from fixing the host to the service checks running again. And what happens is whenever a host goes down, we no longer run the service check. We actually wait a few minutes before running that service check. So what I can do is manually force a recheck and have that system recheck, make sure everything goes green, and then our BSM will be back online. And this view too will become back online. Okay. Whilst we wait for that to update, that's the end of my content for the day. So, Helen, did we get any questions? I think we're just about on time.
Hey, Neil, thank you for that. Great overview. Good tips and tricks. I've had one question come through to me on private chat, which is BSM part of my Opsview monitor license?
Yeah, it is. So this new view will come in Opsview 6.4, but the previous view, so I go to BSM summary, this view here, and all of the functionality you get. It's the classic view and our normal, our normal BSM. Yeah, that's all part of your current Opsview installation. So yeah, that's part of the default license.
So there's no extra cost?
No, in fact, everything I've showed you today is all part of the default license with no extra cost at all.
Perfect, thank you, Neil. I know that you're going to be running a BSM training session in August.
Yeah.
What's that going to cover?
So that's going to cover more of the configuration of BSM. So we configured BSM here. And so that's going to cover some tips for creating your initial views, managing that view, and the best way to create these components. So the best way to create components to cover your important services and how you might integrate them with various BSMs and how you might manage that using the API and things like that.
Okay, thank you, Neil. We'll be sending out the August webinar calendar towards the end of next week. So I don't think there's any more questions that have come through. Let me just check the chat one more time. No, there's nothing. Neil, thank you for today. Thank you for everyone for joining. We will be sending out the recording to you. Have a good day.
No problem at all, guys. Thanks, everyone.